You need to know the percentages of, yes, you do need to know these percentages. So of the 3% of water on Earth that is fresh water, of that 3%, 76% of it is frozen in ice. The ice caps in Antarctica and the Arctic. It's in glaciers. So 76% of that 3%, most of it we cannot use. Shallow groundwater is about 12% of the 3%. We can use this. Deep groundwater is generally too deep for us to get, so we can't use this one, can't use this one. Lakes and rivers and water vapor in the air, we can generally, well, we can't use the water vapor in the air, and besides, that's a very small, that's 0.037% of the 3%, so not much there. And lakes and rivers, which to us might seem like a big water source, are only 0.34% of the 3%. So when you look at all of the water on Earth, such a very small portion of it is in fact available for us to use. Watershed. This is now the section 2 questions. If you want to jump to section 2 in your notes. Watershed was a big deal yesterday because both of the classes, when I asked people what a watershed was, nobody knew. The watershed is the area that water runs off of into a river system. It's not actually a shed, it's not a storage place, it's the area that sheds the water that goes into the rivers. So here in Louisville, if it rains here, where does our water go? Coal Creek. So Coal Creek, we are in the Coal Creek watershed. So the water that rains here goes down the gutters, sheds into Coal Creek. And so you can see this is just the major watersheds. Mississippi, you all know the Mississippi River is big. The Missouri River and the Ohio River both go into the Mississippi, and so you have this massive watershed for the Mississippi River. The Colorado River watershed, the... What's that? Well, how about this? The state of Colorado. Where's the state of Colorado? What watershed or watersheds does Colorado water go into? Not all of them, no. What is this line down here along the top of the Rocky Mountains? Who said that? Say that again. Continental Divide, right? Remember, thank you. Continental Divide divides which watershed the water goes into. The Continental Divide, as you probably know, runs right through the state of Colorado. So some of our water goes to which watershed? The Mississippi, and the other part of it goes to the Colorado River watershed. Thinking about where we live and where the mountains are. That's right. So Colorado River watershed is also Utah and Arizona, and it comes out in the Gulf of California, which is here. But think about where we live, here in Louisville. Which watershed are we part of, Colorado or Mississippi? Mississippi. We're not all three. Okay. Make sure you know this, please. Next. What is the difference between a pond and a lake? A pond and a lake, that's one of those things that, I mean, the textbook mentions, they're not exactly scientific definitions, but in general, of course, we all know ponds are smaller. But the general thing is sunlight can reach all parts of a pond. It is shallow enough that the sunlight can reach all the way to the bottom. What kind of things might that affect? All the kind of life in the pond. That is a really good question. Is Harper Lake a lake? I don't know. It is man-made, right? I believe. And I don't know. So we use, again, in everyday life, we use the words lake and pond in very informal, non-scientific ways. The Great Lakes, definitely lakes. They're huge, right? Right, so how are you supposed to tell? In general, I guess it's not really that important, right? Lake Powell, which is a man-made reservoir, is very, very deep, and I know that water doesn't go, or sunlight doesn't go all the way down to the bottom, so that's a lake. Does it really matter? Probably not. But they are both bodies of fresh water, and that's the main difference. So an ocean, of course, is salty. There are some salty lakes. Oceans, though, all of the oceans in the world, actually connect, right? The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic, the Antarctic, the Indian Ocean, they're all really part of the same massive, huge body of water. And it's salty, okay? The salt lakes are actually inland. All right, let's quickly go through these last couple things. First of all, wetlands. We used to call wetlands swamps, but now we call them wetlands because it sounds nicer. It's a marsh, it's a swamp, and as they mentioned in Tim and Moby, this is an area where there's a lot of permeability, there's a lot of life, and it's very spongy, it's very wet, and there are a huge diversity of birds and insects and stuff in these areas. Now you might think generally people are like, oh, wetlands are stinky, messy, let's drain the wetlands and build houses there. But it turns out they're really important because if you have that wetland, the rivers can flow into it and it provides a kind of a buffer zone. So instead of flooding and then not flowing at all, it adds a little bit of reservoir basically for things to be in. Yeah, that's a good question. That's more of a pond, but it is very swampy there. And I think they're replicating a wetland over there in Community Park. But you can have saltwater wetlands where the fresh water, where the rivers are flowing into the ocean. It's called brackish water, and that's a kind of a combination of both. Here, guys. Now on to, again, the topic for today is kind of groundwater. Where is the water? We were just talking about this. As it rains, it percolates or filters down. Different types of things are more permeable than others. And then it gets trapped. It's not exactly like a big lake underwater. It's more like, again, something more like a sponge where there's rocks and there's spaces in between. And then you have the impermeable layers down below. And that's the groundwater. And then in this picture you can see this is how we get the water out of the ground. You dig a well, and you can see if the water table goes down, and this has happened many places in Colorado where we build huge subdivisions and there's wells if enough people tap into the well, then the water level in the ground will actually go down and those wells will go dry. You guys were talking about this. An artesian well is because there's water above it. You don't need to pump it. It just comes up because of the water pressure. And here's another aquifer. Groundwater that flows to the surface is called a spring. The other thing, when you hear about things like El Dorado spring water, as the water comes through the rock actually can act as a filter. If you've ever seen the filter in like backpacking filters, it looks a little bit like sandstone or something like that. And so water coming straight out of a spring has been filtered through something like sandstone and can be very good, pure water. I think we've just got a couple more things real quickly here. Nope, that's it. We're going to talk tomorrow about water quality and drinking water. And here's the final thing. This was the very last section. The very last section in the book, section 5, it talks about treating drinking water. Because our drinking water is there's not a lot of sources of water we can use. The water that goes down our drains, goes down the toilets, goes down the gutters, all of that water is captured through the sewer system, and it is treated and filtered through a number of steps so that it can be reused. And you think about something like going on the space station or something like that, where the water sources are extremely limited. Water is very heavy. you can't really take it up into space with you very well. And so we've gotten very good at making systems to filter the water. So first filtration, they put substances in to get the other things out of it, treat it with chemicals. A second filtration, chlorination. Chlorine, of course, kills bacteria and many living things. That's why swimming pools are highly chlorinated, because lots and lots of people are swimming in them, and you want to kill, and little kids sometimes pee in them. But swimming pools are very clean. If you hear stories sometimes about people swimming in lakes, or you remember our ponds from last year, ponds have a tremendous amount of living things. So if you're swimming in a pond, you're swimming with all that. And tomorrow we talk about Louisville's water supply.